What is going on, everybody? Happy Friday morning. Welcome into our latest TDR Traded Black podcast. What'd y'all think of that new intro? Like some of those graphics? Do we need to tweak it a little bit? Love to get your feedback on what you liked and maybe if we should tweak it a little bit. But always trying to improve the product and make it look good, along with featuring some big name thought leaders. As we have one yet again here today, we're going to talk about banking reform once again and why this person feels more bullish than ever on legislative process for the cannabis industry under the Trump administration. Someone who's actually been involved in this space for well over a decade and has a wealth of knowledge and experience in bank accounts for the overall cannabis industry. So he knows banking better than anyone, and that's Tyler Beuerlein. So we're going to bring him in just a moment. Let's first bring in AV here on a Friday morning. How are you, sir? Good to see you.
Good. Nice busy week.
It has been.
RFK hearings out of the way. Maybe a little bit of, like I said, positive news on the horizon. It's march forward.
What'd you think of Senator Kennedy there? That one conspiracy theorist comment with Kash Patel. I thought that was let's make it.
I thought Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard, and RFK all stood their ground.
Yep.
I think that we got to see a lot of grandstanding by senators, a lot of grandstanding just in general. A lot of people coming to the aid of big pharma, even though I really don't believe that they are truly stifling this industry or the enemy. I mean, I've said a lot of the times they have done a lot of good, even though they do some bad and nefarious activity. Kash Patel's was the most interesting, and Tulsi Gabbard's was the most interesting. They were asking her if she was ever conversing with Hezbollah or if she was a Russian asset, like just asking her.
Wow.
So it was eye-opening. RFK's was the one that I was
handled himself.
most intrigued.
Handled himself so well.
Yeah. He's going to do well. He's going to do well if he gets confirmed. I don't know how big cannabis is on his agenda. However, I do know it's going to be on his agenda as it relates to harm reduction, the opioid crisis, and things like fentanyl in this country. But it's going to be a wait and see. He's definitely not going to be adversarial. That's for a fact.
Well, we also follow the psychedelic space, and let's see what happens if he's appointed and if some sort of news materializes this year, and what will that do for the industry? Hopefully it wakes it up. Not to sit here and say it's quiet, but there's a lot of research going on behind the scenes, but the stocks have been at a standstill for quite some time. So an appointment that's official there, I think, would be positive momentum for the industry, given his take on the overall space. But we're talking about cannabis again here this morning as we talk about banking reform, among other things. And with that, let's welcome in. He is the Chief Strategic Business Development Officer at Safe Harbor Financial, and it trades under the ticker symbol SHFS on the NASDAQ, and a former catcher of the New York Mets, Tyler Beuerlein. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it. Yeah.
How's it going?
Pleasure as always.
When did you play with the Mets? How many years ago was it?
Oh, gosh. Don't remind me. You're making me feel old. I got drafted. I went in the 7th round in 2001.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was there. In fact, 2 months after I signed, I was in New York. I was in the middle of September 11th. So it was
wow.
It was like going from the highest high to the lowest low, in a short order. But feel lucky to have had the experience.
And your uncle Steve, correct? Played in the NFL, Cowboys, Panther, or cousin? Okay.
Yeah, 17 years, 17-year career. So he had quite a run.
Well, I witnessed him at the playoff game in Detroit back in 1991. So up until last year, it was the only playoff win the Lions had. And believe it or not, I was a Cowboys fan at that game at the Silverdome in Pontiac. And I was basically the only fan out of 87,000 fans at that old stadium that was cheering for the Cowboys. But Steve Beuerlein, he had a heck of a season that year to bring the Cowboys back to glory, because Troy Aikman was hurt for half the season. But there you go.
He did. Yeah, he had a great run. He's done
memory lane. So tell him I say hello. But listen, we wanted to have you on. First up, I wanted to quickly outline your background. I know you've been on a few times with us in the past, but you've got 11 years of experience in this industry. You've helped facilitate over $500 million in banking transactions and helped over 1,000 cannabis bank accounts, which segues into what I want to talk about next. So what I want to discuss, in a recent post that you put on LinkedIn, you mentioned that you're now more bullish than ever when it comes to legislative progress in the 11 years since you've been involved in the industry, citing that the industry is not talking about the things that matter. Instead, you think the industry should be talking about job growth, which makes total sense with this current administration. So maybe elaborate on what you mean by that specifically, and really what makes you feel more bullish, because I know you've been you've been very pessimistic towards, legislative process over the last 4 years. Who hasn't? but I thought this was welcoming news, especially coming from someone like yourself.
Yeah, I think so. The reason why I am so bullish now is because the reasons why legislative progress will occur have nothing to do with our industry. And I know that sounds ironic, but if you look at Trump, and love him or hate him, and I understand
Yep.
it's a very polarizing thing, I've seen nothing but doom and gloom from experts in the industry,
Yeah.
whether it be the Maltz appointment or whatever the case may be, but we're not paying attention to the right things. So there are really three catalysts that I would hope our industry would start paying attention to and try and view things from Trump's lens, right? Which is it can be a difficult thing to do, but he's he's already his blinker is on, right? And he's
Yeah.
already, I believe, telegraphing what's coming. And so there's really three main points, and one of them is right now the labor statistics in the U.S. do not reflect cannabis jobs because it's federally illegal at the Schedule One level, right? Well, he knows full well that if this goes Schedule Three, all of a sudden, let's say 500,000 jobs hit the jobs report. That is a huge win for the administration.
Huge.
He knows it. I know for a fact that he knows it. And he is going to take advantage of that in one way, shape, or form. So,
Okay.
so I would say that's one thing that as an industry we need to understand. We need to understand the way he's looking at it. The second one is in we're already seeing this take place, in his speeches and things like that. He's talking about conservative voices. We've seen a bunch of publicity about Operation Choke Point 2.
Yep.
And and for those that aren't aware, and again, this is something I've tried to help educate the industry on through the last 11 years. I would say for the first 8, I constantly got calls from people in the cannabis industry desperate for bank accounts. Well,
Yeah.
what those people don't realize is there are a whole series of other perfectly legal industries that are highly regulated that have had the same issues. And during the Obama administration, there was a legislation put out called Operation Choke Point,
Yep.
and it's widely viewed on the conservative side as a direct attack against the gun and ammo industry through the banking system.
Mm.
And it's been very polarizing, and it's created all kinds of issues for a whole series of sister industries that are highly regulated over the years. And so the Trump administration also knows this full well. They want to put a stop to that and the banning of conservative voices as they talk about it in the public. Um, and so that is the reason why I believe something like SAFE or something that will include the protections of SAFE will pass in short order. And I think what they're going to do is they're going to make sure that Operation Choke Point never occurs again,
Yes.
and they're going to use cannabis as a vehicle to help get that passed without opposition.
Okay.
So I think that's the second bullet that I think we all need to be aware of. And then the third is he's been very vocal about a flat corporate tax. And
Yes.
again, that's something that our industry is not talking about, and that would have a massive impact to net
Huge.
revenues in our industry if passed. So anyways, those are all the things that for me, uh, you know, being involved in the political realm behind the scenes, hearing things, along the way from very reliable sources, to me, it couldn't be clearer where the administration's headed. Now, whether or not our industry, chooses to recognize that remains to be seen. But I think we should all start looking at it through that lens.
Hmm.
So I agree with everything you just said. Everything. What about Tim Scott? Because we know that he's not a friend of the industry. We know that he right now is the chair on the banking committee. And his tweet on debanking last week led with legal businesses, which on the federal level, we're not legal businesses. We are legal on the state level. Are we reading too much into that? And how much do you think, or how much do you believe that Trump can supersede and basically hand down orders and say, Senator Scott, this is my agenda. You're on my team. Get this done.
I am of the belief that it's already happened, most likely.
Okay.
I think that he's already had the conversation with Maltz. I think he's
Okay.
probably already had the conversation with Tim Scott. And maybe it's a situation where Schedule 3 gets done, and then, that's enough of a gray area that Tim Scott can use that as a quote unquote more of a legal play. So
think you're bang on.
I'm of the belief that these things have already been laid out. And if you look at the way, one thing about Trump is, again, he's always going to tell you where he's going. Now, he may not do it directly, but it's very easy to see how he's laying things out. He's always got an end game in mind, right?
So you think for a lot of this stuff to materialize, still rescheduling, you think, in your view, has to happen first?
I think it will happen first because I think he wants that immediate economic win.
Yeah.
And again, I think it has less to do with anyone's stance on cannabis and more to do with just, hey, our economy is growing at this pace.
I tend to agree with you. I mean, that's logical. Logic would tell you that Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 gives the politicians cover fire to now talk about something that's less onerous and not sitting next to and on the Schedule 1 narcotic definition. That being said, I mean, I know that you have a lot of relationships, and a lot of the time when we talk, it's about, do we need FinCEN guidance? Do we need change to AML laws? Like, when do you see credit cards coming into this?
Yeah.
Are you talking to any of those providers, or have you had any high-level talks with them, and or are they aware of what changes could be potentially coming to the industry?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, and it leads to a great point. One thing that I would encourage lobbyists in our industry to really pursue is a direct conversation with the branded card networks before any legislation is passed, because as it stands right now, and I've been fortunate to get close with those companies over the years for a lot of reasons. There's no guarantee that they're coming in. In fact, I would, the way that SAFE is written now, I would bet that there's a 90+% chance that we do not see the branded card networks enter, because they've been extremely specific about federal legality being the catalyst for them coming into the industry. So I think federal legality. Obviously, rescheduling does not change that.
No.
SAFE does not make it a federally illegal product, and therefore, the notion inside those buildings on the legal and compliance side is they will not participate, and that's something that's also being missed by our industry. So, my hope is that there will be a heavy consultation with those companies in language that's submitted that will appease whatever issue they have in a way that allows them to come into the space.
Right.
Do you think the conversation around crypto has accelerated this for us, and kind of it's a byproduct? Because if you're logically looking at this, you've seen Jamie Dimon come out and just rail against crypto. He's also come out and said, well, we would bank cannabis companies if we could. And now the banks are getting guidance from the Fed that they can now custody crypto. If you're going to custody a product like crypto on a pretty broad scale, it makes sense to be banking a legitimate business in the United States that employs 500,000 people and generates $30 billion in revenue. Do you see any corollaries there, or am I just kind of reading into it?
No, I do. And again, that goes back to my point of all of these other highly regulated industries now are starting to become more mainstream. And so now the issue's grown and there's more awareness. And so, and then you've got the lobbying power of those industries now accompanying whatever lobbying power cannabis had, right? Which isn't much in the grand scheme of things, unfortunately. So I think all of those things help. And crypto is an example of a highly regulated industry that's legal, but has been essentially shut out of the banking system. Like, if I can't tell you how many crypto companies I talk to that they can't find a bank account. They can't find anyone willing to serve them. And there are maybe 5 institutions in the country that are openly doing it, right? And so that is another big issue.
A lot of change. So what language needs to be included in SAFE to prevent a revival of Operation Choke Point later on down the road? Because I know that's always been a concern if SAFE were to pass, let's say, over the last 4 years, which it did not. But what exactly, we have ideas, but knowing your background and expertise, what needs to be included?
That remains to be seen, Shad. That's something that's going to have to be done from a legal perspective. That's outside of my purview, because I think it's not just the current issue with Operation Choke Point, is preventing it from ever happening again.
Yeah,
I think that's going to be the biggest catalyst for this. Is let's put an end to this now. Let's make sure it never happens again, and let's make sure that no industry or political adversary can be targeted through the banking system. One thing I will tell you on the cannabis side is there is still no FFIEC handbook for examiners on how to examine an institution banking cannabis. So for every industry, there's an FFIEC handbook that the examiners use to go into an institution and determine whether or not they're complying with the expectations. That still has never been done. So there are four bank and credit union regulators. All of them have developed their own internal policies on how to do it, but there's never been official guidance given to them. So the way SAFE is written, they have 180 days to come out with FFIEC guidance for examiners. That
Interesting.
alone will be a huge help.
Huge help.
And guys, I know it's Section 10 in the Safe Banking Act that nullifies or alleviates Operation Choke Point 2.0 about how to stop it. Let's say on a go forward basis. Remember happening again. That's yet to be determined. But the Section 10 language is in there that stops Operation Choke Point 1.0 and 2.0 dead in its tracks.
So you brought up Tim Scott earlier, Anthony, you did, and you believe, Tyler, like those conversations have already happened behind the scenes. You know that? Like, is that just a feeling? Like, what makes you think that?
I know some folks, around them, and I think that so here my thought is this: everything that's going to happen over the next 3 to 6 months has been planned out over the last 6 months to a year, right? So these appointments, the way they're operating, the way that Trump's getting ahead of it with some of the things he's saying publicly, I think it's a very calculated step-by-step process that they've had in place for a while.
Yeah. Well, one can only hope that you're right, but some interesting takes here, that's for sure. But yeah, I know, like in the past, you've always said, like, I'm not getting my hopes up too much. You and I used to go back and forth 4 years ago on LinkedIn, and you'd said, this sounds to me like somebody just wants to win an election. But we had Weldon Angelos on Wednesday. He made a very good point, and he's just like, kind of referred to President Biden worrying more about his legacy and how Donald Trump is naturally not a politician and just looks at things from a common sense standpoint. All we can do is just basically communicate that sort of feedback that we're hearing from thought leaders like yourselves in the industry. And we only hope that, but it just appears that way, does it not?
Yeah, to me, it's clear as day. And again, having done this for so long, and one thing that I've learned in this industry is it's never what they're saying publicly, and fortunately or unfortunately, I've been able to be in some rooms behind the scenes, and when you understand how things really work, you also understand what the real catalysts are for change. And so my pessimism during those times, Shad, was based on who was involved, what I knew behind the scenes. And those conversations were drastically different than what some of those same people were saying publicly.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was like, okay, we're the political football still, and there's really no hope for change, even when all three branches were Democrat controlled.
Yeah.
Everybody was super optimistic in our industry, and for me, it was just, it was more of the same. And I hate to be that way, but always going to be honest about what I see and hear.
Aside from the obvious, Tyler, how does this transform the business of Safe Harbor? How does this propel you guys forward? Because there are a lot of people out there that think, oh, we're going to streamline the cannabis industry. We get banking reform, the financial institutions, the REITs, like they're kind of going to be negatively impacted like this. And I think that couldn't be further from the truth. This is a catalyst for those underlying businesses that have stood the test of time, and they're battle tested. They know and fundamentally understand the industry.
Correct. And I think so. A few things on that front. One, Schedule 3, obviously net revenues increase. Our deposit base increases. That's a huge revenue driver for us. And maybe more importantly, it would open up lending for us, and it would open up the captive audience that qualifies for that lending, because all of a sudden the bottom line of these businesses becomes much healthier, and it's much easier for us. We have a much bigger base that qualifies for our lending products, right? Because with 280E right now, it's very difficult to find operators that cash flow and cover debt service that we need to grant financing, right? So that's one big thing. I think the other thing is, it's important to keep in mind, and if you look at Canada, it's federally legal.
Yep.
However, there are very few number of institutions willing to bank it still. These will always be highly regulated cash intensive industries.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's going to require a very specific skill set for institutions to serve them. And it's always going to be expensive for us.
You find that most Canadian banking institutions are still a challenge?
I believe there are only 4 to 5 institutions that will serve cannabis in Canada now.
Huh, I didn't know that.
Still, even despite being perfectly legal in that country. So
Wow.
the notion that all of a sudden, Chase is coming in, I don't believe that will ever be the case. They might make, an investment company that touches it. But I think for us, it's going to propel the business. It's going to help us in a number of ways. And if payment infrastructure comes in, that will also benefit us, because then we can start offering mainstream payment products to the industry and to our client base, which again helps everybody and drives revenue to our bottom line.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you see this moving quick if there is a rescheduling ruling?
I do. I think.
What does that mean when you say short order? Like, I don't want to give timelines, but is it realistic to think something could get done this calendar year?
Yeah. I think on the rescheduling side, certainly. I think on the banking legislation side, it may take a little longer, but I think it absolutely gets done within the next 18 to 24 months. If I had, and again, I hate predictions. You guys know that. But just based on what I'm seeing, again, I think these things have been laid out before he's even gotten into office.
Okay. One of our viewers, William Jonathan, writes, can you get Tyler's opinion or thoughts on uplisting? Anything you want to add to that? Or
again, it remains to be seen. What I've found in this industry is there's always a difference between what people on the front line say as opposed to the legal and compliance departments, whether it be Visa, MasterCard, or with NASDAQ or NYSE. And so I think there's a wide belief that it will enable uplisting. But again, and it just goes back to, I hope the lobbyists involved are getting the exact language from these parties that's going to enable them to enter. Because if there's anything that's, if there's an I that's not dotted or a T that's not crossed, it's not going to happen.
Well, I hope
we've heard, thinking about it pragmatically, that Trump is also on the uplisting train. He's been briefed that the Canadian companies are taking full advantage of our capital markets, and the U.S. companies are basically, I don't want to call them bastardized, but forced to list on the CSE and then leverage the OTC markets in the U.S. And that, to him, is a major talking point about legitimizing the industry.
We spoke, and that's my point. If you understand the way he thinks about things, it's very easy to see where he's going.
Yeah. Well, we spoke with Ed Conklin and Safira Galoob on Wednesday, the newly formed United States Cannabis Roundtable, and their body language is like head explosion once he finds out. Probably knows to a certain degree, but not full into detail as to what's going on with these American companies, like Anthony's pointed out, while these Canadian companies are listing on senior exchanges and international ones as well. But there's no more lower hanging fruit than that example right there.
Agreed.
So, anyway, lots changed since the early days of your first MJ Biz, where you used to sit beside the exit door just in case the cops would come in and raid what was going on.
I tell everybody the first one. The only topic of conversation was, if the feds raid us, which exit are we running to? Literally, that's all anyone could talk about. So
what year was that? What do you know?
Gosh, maybe 2013, 2014. Maybe somewhere in that range.
Think about it. That's not that long ago. Like, think of how much changed, right?
Yeah, but I mean, Shad, the difference year over year in this space has been astounding. And it's pretty wild to think about being at this point now as opposed to where we started. I mean, I could tell you guys stories for days. I'm sure everybody could.
You always have some great stories when we see you in person, but certain things we can share and certain things that we cannot. But it's always a blast seeing you. If you had to give any kind of insight, like for people looking at stock share prices right now, not a lot of volume trading right now. Things seem to be bleeding out, and everybody's just kind of like doom and gloom right now at the space. But if you had to look at 2025 and where this is going, what would your message be to a group of investors regarding the overall industry?
Gosh, I go back to that old Warren Buffett saying, get greedy when others are fearful,
Yeah.
and fearful when others are greedy. And I think from a public market perspective, it definitely feels like we're at a low point. But again,
Yeah.
for me, it's weird because I've never been more optimistic about real impactful change. And so it's this weird
And that's
place
saying a
to be
lot.
in for me.
That's
Yeah,
saying
I
a
mean,
lot from,
because I haven't, like I said, I've been notoriously pessimistic with these things, and it just, based on what I'm seeing, we're in for a hell of a ride in the next 18
Well,
to 24
I,
months.
I said this on Wednesday's stream. If I was an operator in the space right now, I don't think there's ever been a better time in the history of the industry to be in the industry from an operator's perspective. From an investor's perspective, when people hear, well, change could be 18 to 24 months away, they're thinking, oh shit, like this is going to take a long time. It's a very delicate dance that we're doing right now, especially because of the amount of momentum we got with the HHS ruling and the final rule getting put into motion versus coming home with all of this stuff. But I agree with you. I mean, being an operator in the space and being one of the participants in the industry, I don't think the future could be brighter for people running a sound operation and a sound business within this
yeah.
industry. From an
in
investment
the
perspective,
in the right markets.
correct.
Yeah.
From an investment perspective, hearing 18 to 24 months, we could be looking at, let's say, the grand prize. People are kind of looking around like, oh man, that's that's kind of an elongated timeline, and that makes some people anxious when
Well,
they've seen what they've
I
seen
don't think it's
now.
going to take that long.
Yeah,
That's more of
I
a
think it
buffer.
could.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it could.
yeah,
But I don't. I think things are going to move faster than people realize at this point. Because
yeah.
again, I think this is stuff that's been in motion for
Yeah.
some time.
Well, when you say 18 to 24 months, my interpretation to that is that this doesn't begin in 18 to 24
No,
months. This
it's
is
already
what's going
begun.
to be
It's
developing.
already begun.
And whatever we're
This
looking
is
at right now,
yeah,
let's say there's some sort of banking language it's not passed or any bill that's passed regards to say for 18 months. But if there is rescheduling announced at some point this year, where we're at right now is going to be rear view mirror. We're going to be at a completely different level. And then there's going to be a lot of, I would say, restored confidence, I think, in the industry. And then from there, it's just like, okay, like it's becoming a reality. Things are actually changing, which is what people want. And incremental steps, as you always say, right, Anthony?
yeah. And I mean, the day rescheduling, the day the NPRM is signed and sealed, delivered, we never look back. As an industry, it's now future. Doesn't matter what happened in the past.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
that's the inflection point.
well, and I think it will be the first time that the industry realizes how much money is on the sidelines that's been wanting
Yeah,
to make a run at this. And I think you're going to see a flurry of M&A.
yeah,
I would anticipate that valuations would, again, um, we can all pontificate, but I think it's going to be a hell of a ride if and when these things happen
yeah.
in the short term.
Yeah.
Same. I think there's some balance sheet issues with some of the operators, and
Mhm.
it'll be hard to find dance partners. But I think recapping some of these companies, having capital infusions come into the tier ones that are already throwing off cash. And I mean, I agree with you. I know that there's capital on the sidelines looking to come in here, especially once we start to see markets markets find an equilibrium, because that's the one major problem with this industry. You get a market that opens, prices skyrocket, then you start to see compression, and it's like the operators' numbers on a quarterly basis are just in a complete wave pattern. Once that normalizes, I mean, real investors will start taking this industry very seriously.
Well, looking at things objectively, we have a viewer that's very smart guy. I love hearing his comments. The Dank Informer, he writes, investors have heard changes coming in the next 18 months for the last 10 years, though. It's a good point. And it's a valid point.
That's one of the reasons why I've been so pessimistic because to me it's never been coming. I think the difference is now, again, just based on from my perspective, and it may be very different, maybe a very different perspective than anybody else has in the industry. I get it. I hate being a person that says, oh, the next 18 to 24 months. But again, I think these two things specifically are imminent.
Yeah.
And I think it's a matter, I mean, we could see a reschedule in my mind in the next 2-3 months. Even though I know that hearing had been delayed, I think
Yeah.
there's a mechanism there for it to get done without the charade. And
Yeah.
I think the banking legislation side, again, his blinkers on. He's going there. What that time frame is, I don't know, but that is going to happen in my
Do you think
mind.
once there is a rule, how does this all work? Is there going to be like a lot of appeals if there is a ruling based off of that? Or like, how does that work? Because I'm not a lawyer.
Again, it remains to be seen, but I think that this is the reason why cannabis being coupled with Operation Choke Point legislation. I think that's a way for them to appease both sides.
Yeah.
We got lucky.
And really, yeah, I think we're going to end up being lucky to be coupled with something like that. And we're lucky that this has been such a long drawn out process, and we're on what, iteration 8 of
Yeah.
this. I mean, the first time I heard about SAFE was literally a decade ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And every time, for instance, like every time Governor Beshear right now in Kentucky is talking about cannabis, he brings up the fact that he's speaking with the NRA, and these gun laws as it relates to medical marijuana make 0 sense. The fact that somebody on the other side of the aisle is talking about that, and the fact that I can damn well assure you the guys on the Republican side of the aisle are fully aware of that as it relates to the NRA when they come to the table to talk, is very good in terms of everybody getting together and really understanding the problems that we have outside of just the cannabis industry.
I interviewed 2.5 years ago with our good friend Rob Seacrest, Dana Rohrabacher, if you remember him, but his amendment with the Rohrabacher-Blumenauer amendment, he had mentioned, if I remember correctly, it was 10 years before that was actually passed. So here we are, 10 years was safe. But I'm still looking at this subjectively and looking at it and say, you know, to a lot of people that are writing it here, like, yeah, I've heard this before, but
the difference is the catalysts have nothing to do with cannabis at this point.
Mm-hmm.
We're
to the original
going to
point why we had
piggyback.
to the original point why we had you.
So all of these things again are, in the past it's always been, well, the cannabis industry deserves this, the cannabis industry, you know, we need this for this reason. Well,
throw that out.
Whether or not we realize it, nobody in the political class cared unless they were receiving money. I hate to say that.
Correct.
This is different because all of these underpinnings are not our industry.
You know, I watched 20 minutes of the video interview that we did with you 1 year ago. You know, one of the things that we mentioned about how the messaging is not right in Washington amongst these lobbying efforts. This is why I'm hopeful with this new administration. And I think we understand from the conversations, Anthony, that you and I've had recently. I think they're hearing with everything that we're saying right now. And that's needs to be somewhat.
They are. I think they are. And I said this a couple months back. Trump does not care about cannabis. If I had to bet, I would say Trump probably hates cannabis, the plant. Does he care about jobs? Does he care about revenue? Does he care about industry? Does he care about things that he can say that he legitimized? Is this going to be a stamp on his resume and a notch on his belt that he's taken away from Joe Biden and from Kamala Harris? I would like to think so, and logic would tell you that's how he plays the game.
Yep.
Tyler's right. This plays into his hand completely. He also believes that people should have access to cannabis on a medical level, whether that was just optics, whether that was him trying to get votes. He said it. And I do agree with Dank. We've heard 18 months for the last 10 years, but we've also never had 2 presidents speaking about it within an election year. We've never had a rescheduling initiative in decades, and the momentum is there. Like, the mechanisms are there to get this done, and the conversation seems like it's finally going to materialize this time around.
Yeah. Dank Informer, you're right. I'm surprised they haven't moved faster, to be honest.
No.
Maybe. Have you had a lot of
not in that regard
lobbyists or people that are trying to speak with this Trump administration that are going to be the front runners for messaging? Have they reached out to you, Tyler?
Some do. I would say most of my conversations with those folks is kind of like an offline format for info, right? Or for certain contacts that might be able to help them get messaging correct, which, you know, I've always been happy to provide them any info necessary. But what I find far too often, and I hope it's not the case, is typically right before there's a vote, I will get a call from a lobbyist or a politician and they'll call with a end game in mind, and they'll be using information that is wholly inaccurate.
Right.
Okay.
Far too often. So again, my hope is that doesn't happen. But the flip side of that is, I think in this case, I think it's going to be out of their hands regardless,
Yeah.
because I think he sees the wins. He's already found a way to take them, and he's going to.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's the difference here.
Well said, my friend. I hope you're right. Tyler
Me too.
Beuerlein, best looking guy in cannabis, buddy.
Yeah, right. you haven't been around much if that's the case, buddy.
All right, my friend. Listen, keep in touch. Where are you in Arizona? Or are you traveling right now?
I'm in Arizona. Just got back off the road, but yeah.
All right, my friend.
Weather's got to be nice in Arizona right now.
Yeah, it's not bad. It could be a lot worse.
Hopefully your buddy down in Scottsdale there is still installing those 2,200 pools annually. What a hell of a story that was.
Oh yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah. Anyway,
I need to get out to Scottsdale for some golf.
Come on out. It's beautiful weather right now.
What a great spot, huh?
Yeah.
I love Scottsdale. Scottsdale's the best.
Come on out.
Yeah. Well, we need to. All right, my friend, keep in touch, okay? And we had any news, well, glad to have you back on, okay?
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. Good seeing you.
Thanks,
Tyler. Appreciate it. One of the great guys in the industry, that's for sure. But look,
refreshing, logical, and base take. That's what we need. Well, not sensational. It was rooted in fact, and I would bet you that with the business that Safe Harbor's in, they're talking to people outside of the circle of people that, let's say, the MSOs are talking to.
And I will say this, everyone, we've had Tyler on in the past before, and he has never, ever gotten his hopes up about anything related to cannabis reform out of the 4 or 5 years that I've known him for. So when I saw that post, it definitely grabbed my interest because his tone had changed completely, but it's accurate. It has nothing to do with, oh, please, cannabis deserves this, blah, blah, blah. No, it's about how many jobs is currently created. If it's not actually registered on the statistics report, then you add in that report plus, as you said, the international companies listing on senior exchanges. It just goes hand in hand.
And they're Canadian companies. Trump's got the hots for Canada right now in Mexico.
Can we get Eric Berlin back on? Steve, I've actually reached out to him 3 times this week, so I will keep you posted, hopefully to get him on next week.
He might be busy doing things of importance. Not that coming on the podcast is not important, but my bet is he's doing some things of importance right now.
With a grin on your face. Yes, and I think you're right. So just be patient with us, but we hear you, and we're thinking the same things as you. So we'll keep you posted. Eric Berlin is great, Mick, 100%. The future is bright green, but the timeline is unknown. The Dank Informer, I'm not going to disagree. By the way, we got to get you on the podcast. We got any guests scheduled for next Friday yet?
Next Friday, I am not sure.
Dank Informer, you watching?
I'm not sure.
Dank Informer, we'll DM you, as we said. Next Friday, should we have the Dank Informer on? I don't think we confirmed. Oh, yeah, the ex-president's masks. That's what we're thinking.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Okay, folks, let's jump into the wire here on TDR's Trade to Black. Begin with TerrAscend. They announced pre-released earnings here this morning. I didn't get a chance to look at this, but when I quick glanced, looked like revenue was flat, but margins improved. So can you share some of the numbers that you saw? And at first glance, what's your take on these latest earnings that they pre-announced?
Yeah, so this was nice to see them pre-announce. I mean, just so everybody knows, I've got a sizable position in TerrAscend. I've had one for years now. I bought some more stock this morning. That order filled. That I was talking about on Twitter earlier. So just to preface that, I was surprised, if I'm being honest. I talked to Jason Wild this morning about the Q. I was expecting numbers to be down for the quarter. Michigan and New Jersey scared me. Michigan, we've seen numbers coming out of there that there's a lot of to be determined in the Michigan market. It's in flux. New Jersey's been just very, I don't even want to say very competitive, but very dilutive in retail brands coming online. The fact that they stayed the course, revenue was up, I think, 0.3%.
Okay.
Quarter over quarter, margins were up 2%, and they retained the number 1 market share in New Jersey, and they're bullish on Pennsylvania. I mean, TerrAscend is one of the operators in PA. Don't quote me on this, but I think they have 8 dispensaries in PA. They've got 150,000 square feet of cultivation, and they've got processing. Governor Shapiro is apparently having an address on Tuesday that will address the tax budget, which will include cannabis on a go-forward basis. And I reached out to Jason. Jason and Ziad are going to come on next week,
Okay.
I think Monday, to lightly talk about the pre-announce, as well as their take on the go-forward prospects on the Pennsylvania market, which would be transformational for them, having PA go adult use.
Yeah. You brought up Michigan. Tough day yesterday for Cureleaf and Hello Farms. They settled a lawsuit where they were actually ruling from a jury that Cureleaf's got to pay $32 million. That's a tough situation because I realized the original contract that was put in place was well before prices just basically plummeted in that state of Michigan. But we'll learn more about that and find out some more information.
I saw that. I'm assuming Curaleaf's going to appeal, but I haven't really looked into it enough to speak about it as it relates to that lawsuit.
All good. We're also working on getting a senator from Pennsylvania on next week. You want to touch on that?
Working on Senator Street from the Street Laughlin bill. We will have him on sometime next week and or the week after to talk about the prospects of the PA market.
Yeah,
and how his bill is probably one of the more logical steps in implementing adult use cannabis framework in the state of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Okay. What else have we got here? Virginia, let's move there now and begin with, is there much to touch on here? Because I know that
it's Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
It's Groundhog Day. I love seeing that the state legislature is passing these things. I like to see that the state legislature is still talking about adult use cannabis, but we all know damn well what Governor Youngkin is going to do. He's going to veto this.
Yeah.
If he doesn't, I will eat my words. We'll all be off for the better. But my bet is that I would bet right now, if there was a poly market or a way to bet on it, that the second that bill touches Governor Youngkin's desk,
vetoed.
It's vetoed and the baby's thrown out with the bathwater. He literally talked like he had an earpiece from Kevin Sabet in his address to the Virginia legislature about a month ago.
Yeah.
That man is not going to legalize adult use cannabis in Virginia.
Yeah.
I'd love to be wrong, but this is not something to get excited about. Virginia will have its day, and it's going to be when Governor Youngkin leaves office.
Yep. And for those that keep reaching out from time to time about where's Guap, Guap's obviously on here now making some comments, but give some love for the guy. He's displaying some stuff behind the scenes right now and going through some things, and we're respecting that privacy. But he will be back in due time. We love Guap more than anyone, but yeah, just be patient with us and be patient with him, and he'll be back on here in no time. So hope that helps explain a few things.
Gretchen and I agree. Youngkin hates pot. That is a true statement.
Mark that.
The man is not obviously well read on the topic. He is a smart gentleman that comes from private equity. So he's definitely not stupid or a career politician, but he does hate cannabis, and he's obviously not willing to look into it or look into any of the data that would counter all of the arguments and talking points that he's made.
Just want to mark this down. Anthony and Gretchen agree on something for the first time. That's at 11:46 a.m. on January
31st. Yeah.
Wow.
We've had 2 days elapse in the 365 between our bet.
That is impressive.
So we should see. Yeah.
Last thing I want to touch on, and it's big news, actually. Back in December, IIPR, they ran into some major issues with one of their largest tenants, which was PharmaCann, based on PharmaCann's defaults on 11 different properties that IIPR owns. However, it was announced yesterday they've reached an agreement, which is good to hear. Did you get a chance to see this, and what are some of the key terms under the agreement with the two companies?
Yeah, so the stock was up, which I didn't understand. I know Colin Farian had some rough numbers on Twitter that it was about a 37% rent abatement for the tenant, which is PharmaCann. There were certain provisions in place on the Maryland and Michigan assets, which I believe are the largest loans in the portfolio, that PharmaCann now have the ability to find a tenant. They're going to, I don't know if they're going to default on the licenses, but they will pass the licenses off to the new tenant. And then this basically, I mean, PharmaCann basically said, come at me, bro, to IIPR, and they obliged for the most part. I don't know if I like this precedent. There's some other companies, I'm not going to name names, within the IIPR portfolio that I would fade. I wouldn't touch IIPR as it stands today, just knowing what I know about the underlying assets within their portfolio. Good news for PharmaCann. not sure it's good news for IPR. And I
No,
mean, I think there's a lot more that we need to see develop.
still a lot of
Um,
locations. Where are you going to find
yeah.
a tenant? I guess you'd have to find more than one.
Well, the problem is you've got two big markets that are contracting, being, well, not two big markets. I know Michigan is a tumultuous market, and that's a big facility. So it'd either take one of the, I would say, savvier operators in Michigan that come in, take over the space and can operate it and actually pay the rent, which the rent's high, to say the least, especially with the escalators that have been implemented in those agreements. Once you kind of pair them with the price compression that's
Yes,
going on in the market, it's very hard to
that's putting it mildly.
service the loans and pay the rent and adhere to the escalators in a market where the price just keeps going down.
Yeah.
I'm very curious to see how this truly gets resolved. But it's a great starting point. Like I said, favorable for PharmaCann. I don't know if I like the precedent for IPR. Some of the other tenants might take this tact as well. And I wouldn't touch it on a go-forward basis.
Yeah. And you're still going to see, I think, Michigan numbers maintain their strength, knowing the price compression for consumers, but for operators, like unlimited license in states has its pros and cons, right?
Yeah, very much so.
All right. That wraps up for today. 46 minutes in. That was a great interview with Tyler. Really good. Glad we had him on, but always good to hear. Look, even though we repeat the same sort of like headings and topics, what we're trying to do is just, bring together as many different people as possible that see things from a different light. So I hope everyone out there got some great value with Tyler being on as well. We're kicking off a weekly segment. Go ahead. What were you going to laugh
To
at?
the gentleman saying Canopy is going to $188 this year, I want whatever you're smoking. I mean, I like what they're doing with CUSA, but I think that's 90x
What
whatever
would
it's
that be
doing,
as
whatever
far
it's
as the
at right
market?
now.
Let's do the math. What would that be for a market cap right now? What's the current market
Let's
cap? What
see.
are they
I got
trading at?
CG. I got CGC on my screen. So yes, that would actually be 90x from where it is right now. They are at a $250 million market cap.
Yep.
So about 10 billion. Yeah, bigger than I would ever expect.
Real big.
Yeah.
Yeah. Guap, I know, buddy.
Interesting analysis. I think that's the guy that was actually chirping at me last year during the Stanley Cup when the Panthers beat the Oilers. But yeah.
Yeah. It's all good, Chad. X knows I lost my dad suddenly on January 4th. I hear you, buddy. Lost my dad 2 years ago, so I understand and relate to what you're going through. Take your time. Yeah, Tyler was good. I was mentioning Monday, we're actually kicking off at 4 o'clock. Michael Bronstein from Attach is coming on, and we're actually kicking off a new weekly segment with Michael Bronstein from Attach. So looking forward to that. And here's the great thing about us partnering with Attach on a weekly segment. We're now going to have access to their entire network. So Senator Street, for example, from Pennsylvania, that's through Attach. So expect some big name people that will continue to grow as far as having access to them
tweet.
as the year progresses. So we're going to be talking all and everything about cannabis reform. And this is one agency that is probably just as connected.
Hold on. What are you talking about, Guap? That says $188. My vision is just fine.
188. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, not $1.88. He said 188. But getting back to my point is we're going to have access to some pretty powerful people. And in the event that we get some sort of legislation movement, the goal obviously is, fingers crossed, we hope to have people like RFK eventually on this podcast. That's the goal. And let's hope we get there. But these are the people that we're going to be working with now, and we're starting to build more and more relationships within the space. So that kicks off Monday at 4 o'clock. We're going to find out about, I know some of you understand who Michael is. He's been on in the past, but we want to get a clear understanding as to who Attach is, what their main objective is in the industry, and what they consider or want to be considering getting something done here in 2025. So we'll lay all that out. And then next week as well, following that, not on Monday, but do we know the date yet that we're interviewing Senator Street next week yet?
We don't.
We don't? Okay.
We don't. I'm talking to his chief of staff right now, so I will have probably something today or tomorrow.
Yeah. Ty Grower, yes. RFK, yeah. That's the goal. You know who should we reach out to now, knowing that he's not in politics? We need to get Matt Gaetz on. Did you see that podcast that he did with Bill Maher?
Bill Maher did.
Love to get his take now that he's stepped away from the political arena. I don't know if he's going to get back in, but in the meantime, as he's a free agent, it'd be great to have him on just to get a,
I know some people that know him very well from Tallahassee.
Yeah, we got to get him on. But I think that's it. And as usual, make sure if you didn't get a chance to see some of our take on what we thought of High Tide's earnings, make sure to scan that QR code. We give that full analysis in our Baked In newsletter. So if you haven't subscribed to our Baked In newsletter, please scan this QR code on our show template, delivered to your mailbox weekdays, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern time. Great takeaways that we have regarding the overall space, and a recap of some of the biggest guests that we have on, including this interview with Tyler, which is good. As usual, as I always say, give this video a like. Make sure to share with your network. Anthony, enjoy the rest of your... oh, yeah, we got no football this weekend. I don't know what to do. Sign of things to come in a couple of weeks.
I'll be barbecuing on Sunday to occupy my time.
What are you barbecuing?
Making a plate of short ribs.
Ooh,
recipe? Like a full slab. I don't have enough time. It takes about 2.5 days.
So if you get a chance, if you want to see how the ribs turn out, give Anthony a follow on Instagram. What's your Instagram handle?
I think it's my name and last name, but I'm not sure. I couldn't. That's me being honest. I'm not sure.
That's promotion at its best. I'm not sure. Yeah. Just type in my name in the search engine. Happy. Always a good time. You as well, my friend. In the meantime, Ron, shovel some snow. Don't know where you're calling from, or like call. I sound like I'm in radio right now, but give us a call. We'll take the 4-7 call for your chance to win a pair of snow shovels, courtesy of Ron's Snow Shovels. In the meantime, everybody, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you back here Monday at 4.
Thanks, everybody.
Now, that was a good one. What'd you guys all think? Did you like what we had to say here today? Do you agree, disagree with what we're saying? Love to get your feedback. As usual, leave comments below. Trade to Black is growing, and we wouldn't have done it without you. So if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also check us out on Apple and Spotify for the audio version. And as usual, leave lots of comments. We, as I said, love to hear back from you. Thanks again, everybody, for watching.